And I did most of the count. I was experienced at Berkeley, where I used to count the demonstrators for the local press. About 1,200,000, no violence. And everybody concluded the Shah was gone.
On December 2nd, during the Islamic month of Muharram, millions of people filled the streets of Tehran's Azadi Square to demand the removal of Shah and return of Imam Khomeini.
Well, that was my personal view, but I must say, when I brought it up as an alternative to the let's help with housing and let's help with, non-military, non-political things, this was in September, country team meeting, I said, look, why don't we go for a hard line against the militants? Here's a chance to get the radicals jailed. But at the same time, go for a soft line on political goals and help the Shah move toward the peace deal. And that would have been the only kind of configuration which would have made sense, which the Shah might have bought. Absent our knowing about his illness, it would be pretty hard to make that thing. And let's forget, he was pretty stupid during this period, too. Instead of going to his cherished allies for 30 years and saying, look, I've got a problem, he was attempting to deal with them in his own way. In fact, the guy he picked as Deputy Inspector General of Imperial Guard had been a Khomeini guy for 5 years, or maybe 3 years, but he went straight to Khomeini. That's why the rapprochement with the religious leaders that he tried for in the spring of '78 didn't work, because the guy that was running it from his shop was running to screw it up on Khomeini's benefit.
There was no attempt to keep up appearances. I assume, but I can't recall directly, that the government was continuing to function in the sense one got a press card. But otherwise, there was no real government. There were regular street demonstrations. Ashura was about to start. This was an occasion for big demonstrations. And essentially the government stood back and allowed this to happen. My main initial impression on those early days in Tehran was of the gasoline shortages and the shortages of the oil that people used for heating their homes and for cooking with. And the outside gasoline stations, there were long lines of cars and long lines of people with receptacles of one form or another to try and get this heating oil. And this was a result of strikes in the oil sector. But the effect was of economic hardship, and I think I always thought this was a major contributory factor to the revolutionary feeling.
Would we have seen a different set of policies had his character been different? I don't think that's the case. I think he pursued an entirely rational and reasonable combination of carrot and stick throughout the period of the revolution. And let's remember that he was continued to assign forceful roles for his military throughout the uprising, throughout the demonstrations. At times when it appeared that he could safely stand by and allow a public expression of dissent. For example, the huge, popular, peaceful demonstrations of Tasu'a and Ashura in December of 1978. He calls the military back to the barracks, lets these demonstrations proceed, and then 2 days following that, the military is once again going out and taking over sites of resistance, trying to get the factories back to work, trying to get the oil fields back to work, arresting leaders of the opposition. In other words, it seems to have been a fairly active combination of policies. It doesn't seem like he was handcuffed. It doesn't seem like he was psychologically broken down, or that somebody who was more forceful would have been any more successful.
I think in those years, they were overconfident that they didn't accurately measure the magnitude of what they were up against. By 77, there were these huge demonstrations. I don't remember the first year I participated, but whenever I was there and there was a demonstration, I joined it and marched with it. And I remember a time or two there'd be a picture of him. I'd usually be on the edge of the, and big ones, they'd have the men on one side and the women on the other, but they'd have large and growing crowds. And they had tragedies like Jolly Square in August of 78, I guess, whatever year it was. But there'd be times when you could see that finally, I have said many times and believe, it's one or two times in my life when I've seen the people of the country overwhelmingly without resort to violence force a very powerful and tyrannical government to leave. And this happened with Marcos later in the Philippines, but just by their courage, it was amazing to see them. You'd be walking on the streets and there'd be young women, there'd be soldiers there with their rifles. They'd come up the long stem road and try to stick the stem down the rifle barrel and say, "We're your sisters, and why do you kill us?" That sort of thing.
If the Shah was looking for American solutions, the Americans had no solution to this popular uprising. It's not clear that anybody could have had a solution to this massive of a popular uprising. Let's keep in mind, this is one of the most widespread popular revolutions that the modern world has ever seen. The percentage of the population that participated in demonstrations and general strikes and other forms of protest was possibly over 10% of the population at these massive, huge demonstrations, widespread general strikes. It's not clear that any other revolution in the modern era has had more than 1 or 2% of the population getting actively involved. This was a massive demonstration to the point where it outstripped the means of coercion. If we think of coercion, you know, how many bullets do you have? How many places do you have to put arrested people? Detention facilities? They were chock full. They were overflowing. If you think of coercion like capital in the bank, you know, a run on the bank is when everybody asks for their deposits all at once. Banks aren't set up to deal with that. Coercion is a similar thing. You're not set up. No police force, no security force in the world is set up to deal with everybody disobeying at the same time. You can't arrest everybody. You can't arrest half the people. You can't really arrest 1% of the population at a stroke. It's like a run on the bank. It's a run on the reserves of coercion.
It's January or February, I don't remember the day. I can tell you what we did. We sped back to Tehran, and we got there 10:30 or 11 at night. And we went by to see Bakhtiar, who was about 2 months before that had been appointed Prime Minister. We were sitting kind of slumped back in a chair, and he had a picture of the Shah on the floor over here, literally a portrait, and one over here of Mossadegh. He'd been, I think, he'd been the youngest minister in Mossadegh's last government for oil, I think it was. I didn't know him, but at all really. But we chatted with him about the situation, and I remember asking him if I could make a phone call, and he said, "You'll have to ask that man over there literally," which is really strange. This guy over there is in military uniform with a pistol. And he said, "Okay." Showed him the phone, so you could see that he had the old guard still there, and they didn't know what to do.